Okay, so the title of tonight's shir is, that we posted on WhatsApp, the third Kufa of HaShevii. So we'll take a short poll of all the two people there. Is this something, when you hear the third Kufa of HaShevii, is that something that sounds strange, like third Kufa of HaShevii, what are you talking about? Or is this something that sounds like, yeah, of course, the third Kufa of HaShevii.
Chof-Beis Shevat, that's the Kufa.
Yeah. So it's very well known, right, that the Rebbe spoke about the kufas of the Friedrich Rebbe's deceased, right? That there's 10, 10, and 10, right? Approximately 10 years in Russia, approximately 10 years in Poland, approximately 10 years in the United States. And we know sometimes the Rebbe split it up in more interesting ways than just that, like in Beis Nissen Memches, the Rebbe said it was 10, 10, and 48, and that's how the Rebbe got to Chaim Shana, 68 years of the Friedrich Rebbe's deceased, because it was 10, 10, and 48 in America. How do you get to 48 in America? Because you have the 10 years of Chaim Kayusei B'Almadin, and the 38 years of the Chiddush and the I forgot all the words over there, but the continuation and basically the continuation of the Friedrich Rebbe's deceased after Yud Shvat Tavshin. And that idea is expressed in other sichas also. There's different ways. Vayirim and Beis talks about the tekufa of the father of the Friedrich Rebbe, and then the tekufa of the Friedrich Rebbe himself. And then there's different ways how the Rebbe splits up tekufas of the Friedrich Rebbe's Messias. And we're all used to hearing about that, but we're not necessarily, I mean, it depends who, but it just doesn't seem to be spoken about as much, the idea of 3 tekufas of the Rebbe's Messias. And the reason why we're discussing this tonight is because, of course, the third tekufa that the Rebbe said, when the Rebbe did split up the Messias into 3 tekufas, the Rebbe said the third tekufa began on Chof-Beis Shevat, Tavshin Memches, the day of the Histalkus of the Rebbetzin. So this is all from the sicha of Chof-Beis Shevat, Tavshin Beis. So that's also a reason to talk about it tonight, because this is what the Rebbe spoke about. The last time the Rebbe spoke about Chof-Beis Shevat, this was a big part of the topic of discussion. It's a long sicha, there's a lot of other ideas also, but we'll focus on this one. So, more specifically, the way the Rebbe split up the 3 tekufas is the Rebbe says the first tekufa is... It's too late now, I already started.
I can't really hear you.
So the way the Rebbe split up the 3 tekufas is that the first tekufa is the day of Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud. Very interesting, just that day. Tekufas is like time periods. We're talking about that there's 3 time periods in Dor HaShvi. So the first time period is just Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud. It's very interesting. The Rebbe doesn't say the 10 years of the Friedrich Rebbe being in America, or it's fine, you can move. The Rebbe doesn't say the 10 years of the Friedrich Rebbe being in America, or the whole Friedrich Rebbe's in CS, or anything like that. The Rebbe just says Yud Shvat Tavshin Yud. And then the second tekufa begins, it's very interesting the way the Rebbe says it, on Yud Aleph Shvat, the next day. But Be'ikr Yud Aleph Shvat Tavshin Yud Aleph, so Yud Aleph Shvat the next year. Right? And that tekufa, Yud Aleph. It says Hayim L'Machar Rasei, the day after, and then but Be'ikr the following year. And that tekufa continues all the way up until Chof-Beis Shevat Tavshin Memches, which the Rebbe calls Tekufa La'achar Status Bitei Shal Kvei Kiddush Shemor V'Chan Yanor Yem Chof-Beis L'Cheresh Echad Asar, which is in the year Tavshin Memches. So you see clearly the Rebbe takes the Messias and divides it up into 3, and says Chof-Beis Shevat Tavshin Memches is the beginning of the third tekufa. Now, if you ask me, this is a little bit different than the Rebbe is taking the Friedrich Rebbe's Messias and splitting it up into 3 tekufas. At least, certainly, when you look at the 3 tekufas, the basic way the Rebbe said it of 10 years, 10 years, and 10 years in America, right? This is very different for a very simple reason. Because when the Rebbe said that, it was already decades later, and the Rebbe was saying the third Tekufa was the 10 years that the Friedrich Rebbe was in America. But here, the Rebbe is talking about 3 tekufas, and the Rebbe is saying one of these tekufas is the tekufa that we're in. Right? This is not
We're starting.
What?
We're starting the tekufa.
Right. And the Rebbe is saying it 4 years in already. Because the Rebbe is saying it in the base that it started in Memtes. So the Rebbe is saying one of these tekufas is the tekufa that we're in, and the other tekufas are tekufas that we're past. So it's very different than talking about 10 and 10 years of the Friedrich Rebbe's Nesius, because that's more analyzing historically and maybe learning something from it. But here we're saying that one of these tekufas is the tekufa that we're in. So as Chassidim, so that should be very relevant to us. If the Rebbe is telling us that the Nesius is divided up into these tekufas and that we're in one of them, right? So naturally, I would think we would become interested in what is special about this tekufa, what is unique about this tekufa. Right? Is anything going on special or different in this time since Chof-Beis Shevat Tafshin Memches? Right?
Does every tekufa have to have a purpose or a function?
So, if you're asking me, so I would think that if the Rebbe is going to the trouble to say that there is this distinction in time periods, so that means there is some teichen, there is some meaning to it. But really, that's exactly that question. What I think we can all agree on is we should at least be asking that question. Like, it's very good that you ask that question. We should at least wonder, hey, if the Rebbe is saying this in the Tekufa, is there anything special going on? Meaning, could we look and see if there's anything going on? Maybe we would look and see it. We can't tell anything different going on. So the Rebbe says that it's the Tekufa that began on Chof-Beis Shevat. And the wording actually in the sicha here is HaTekufa la'acher istata of the Friedrich Rebbe. So it's the Tekufa that's after that. So there's no reason to think that we're not in that Tekufa anymore. So the question is, can we see anything different that's going on in this tekufa? Maybe the answer is no. Maybe we could look and see. Look, the Rebbe was doing basically the same thing the whole time. I don't know. But that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. Okay, so on the most pashtus level, the most simple, the most obvious way of looking to see if something's different would be to see, were there any things that the Rebbe did differently, the Rebbe himself did differently, because we don't know. But the Rebbe, if it's a new tekufa and it's spiritually significant, so of course the Rebbe knows that and is responding to that, or is acting accordingly. So in fact, there's a whole shir from Rabbi Majeski on a website called MoshiachMatters.com, or .org. I always forget if it's .com or .org. It's a very nice website with shirim from Rabbi Majeski and Rabbi Hamnik, and they talk about a lot of interesting things. And he actually has a whole shir over there going over different hanhagas of the Rebbe that changed either after or right around, maybe slightly before Chof-Beis Shevat. And I'm not such a bucky, I don't remember everything he says. I listened to it a couple of years ago. That was one of the big ones. Only
I mean, no weekly.
No weekly. Right. Only on Shabbos the Rebbe started to rain. That was one of them. Every Shabbos, right?
A lot of sichas.
I believe that the Rebbe gave out dollars. You guys probably know this better than me. The Rebbe started giving out dollars either much more often, or I think it started somewhat before.
Because you started to say sichas much more often. No 9:35 reigns, but there were much more sichas. After the sichas, there was dollars.
Okay, so you guys know this stuff better than me. The Rebbe's on Haggis at different times is not my area of expertise at all. I think that's also when the Rebbe started davening the minyan every day, right? That's when the Rebbe started coming down to the minyan. The Rebbe, by and large, stopped saying Maimarim, if not right away. Certainly by Mem Tes, the Rebbe said very few Maimarim. The Rebbe was Magia Maimarim instead. Right? Sefer Maimarim Meluket, the 6 volumes, each year, other than Chelik Aleph, which is Maimarim from. I think there's even one in
Rebbe was
Touch and
standing. Rebbe was standing.
I know. I think there's even one in I think so. But the Rebbe started to be Magia Maimarim instead. Right? The Rebbe took old Maimarim which had been built in Muga and revised them.
Check.
And besides Chiluk Aleph is they're just ones from earlier. Certain Maimarim the Rebbe did earlier. But if you look in Chof-Beis, I'm not sure if Chof-Beis might also have a few from earlier years, but certainly from then on, it's Chof Gimel is Nun Tes, Chof Daled is Nun, Chof Hey is Nun Aleph, and Chof Vav is Nun Beis. And people say interesting things about those Maimarim, that if you look at the built-in Muga and the Muga, it's not necessarily the same. Sometimes the Rebbe totally changes around, took the same themes, but changed the point of the Maimer completely. There's a lot of reason to think that really the Rebbe being Magia the Maimer is much more than taking out typos. It's like the Rebbe really introduced something new. But all these things are not necessarily my area of expertise, but these are all just things that I've heard. On a slightly deeper level would be the question, not only the question of did the Rebbe act differently, but the question of did the Rebbe speak differently? Did the Rebbe emphasize different points? Did the Rebbe introduce new ideas? Are there ideas that the Rebbe started to focus on in a new way that he didn't focus on before? So if you're living through it, then you would pick up on it, right? You would notice if the Rebbe started talking more about Moshiach. I mean, that's one thing that is pretty clear, even though in the whole Mems the Rebbe really spoke a lot about Moshiach, but for sure, after Mem Ches, you get into the Nuns, for sure in that time it reached all new heights, everybody knows that. But in general, you can ask, was the Rebbe emphasizing new ideas? And that's really a hard question to answer, because you really have to be quite bucky, because you have to know, first of all, everything the Rebbe said in the New Tekufa to even know what the Rebbe said. And then you have to know everything that was going on in the Old Tekufa to be able to really compare and contrast and see if it was different. And I can tell you from experience, it's not so easy. Sometimes you see something in a sicha from an Aleph or an Beis, you're like, wow, what an incredible Chiddush. And then randomly you find a mimer from like Mem Daled where the Rebbe said like the exact same thing. Remember the time I sent you a whole thing about that? Remember the time I sent you that thing about Etzem and the Shalom, the Mimer from Shemus, and a mimer from Tafshin Mem Daled or something like that? Anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is that sometimes something feels like a Chiddush, but the only reason it feels like such a Chiddush is because you never saw it before. You didn't know that the Rebbe also said the same thing. So it's very hard to know for sure that something is a whole new thing that's unique to this Tekufa. It's not so simple to, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not a simple thing to identify that. So I had a thought.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
I know. When you have a thought, or you hate when I have a thought. So,
I know me for a while, but I go back way. I know.
So I had a thought that if I'm not gonna be bucky in all of the Rebbe's Torah and really be able to compare and contrast the new Tekufa and the old Tekufa and what's really going on, at the very least, you know what I should do? I should just learn everything from the new Tekufa. Just take everything from Chof-Beis Shevat until Chof Zayin Adar Tafshin Beis, and just learn all of that. And then at the very least, whether I could compare the Chedushim or not or whatever, but at least the new Tekufa will be in my head. The only problem is, it's like 17 volumes of Teres Menachem and 5 volumes of Sefer Maimar Melukit. So, it's only, 22-ish svarim, depending which volume Chof-Beis Shevat is in. I think it's in the Chilik Sheni. Okay, so it's 16 volumes of Teres Menachem. So I'll just learn 16 volumes of Teres Menachem and 5 volumes of Sefer Maimar Melukit, and then I'll be brainwashed into being in the new Tekufa. So I started this project, and I got really far.
What about it?
So I made it through the first mimer. It was very good. It was a 10-page mimer. Parshas Mishpatim, Parshas Shkolim also. And the Rebbe talks very powerfully in this mimer. It's just I don't remember all the details. I just know I underlined a lot of stuff and wrote a lot of stuff in the margins, which means it must have been talking about Moshiach a lot. And powerful stuff about Tchias HaMesim, and the whole purpose of the Neshama coming down is for Tchias HaMesim. What? Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. What day? Yeah, B'yem Rishon Shel Shiva. Yeah. Yeah, so the Maimer that the Rebbe says all So I'm not going to give a share on the whole Maimer since I don't remember the whole Maimer. I should really do Chazar on it. But at the very least, I want to read the last paragraph of the Maimer because it's very powerful, and I think it brings out and touches on several themes that are really key themes of this Tekufah. Okay, so this is the end of that Maimer, the first Maimer after Chof-Beis Shevat, the first Maimer of what the Rebbe is calling the third Tekufah. So the Rebbe says, V'hi Ratzin, Sha'yadei ha'avayda b'chol inyonim elu t'machtzitz shekel, through the avayda of all these concepts of machtzitz shekel that were explained in the Maimer, Nizked l'sisa es reish b'nei Yisrael al yidei Moshe, we should merit to the lifting up of the head of the Jewish people through Moshe. Who is Moshe? Nasi dereinu, is pashtusa de Moshe shebedor zeh, goyel rishon hu goyel achrein. So we should, the Rebbe is saying here else, and we should merit to the lifting up of the head of the Jewish people through Nasi dereinu, the extension of Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the first Redeemer and the last Redeemer. Shal yadei yeh nesias reish. And through him will be the lifting up of the head, and how much more so, all of the parts that are lower than the head. That he'll lift up all the Jewish people without any exception. In the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. Now, I don't know about you, but if you think about what the Rebbe is saying, we're saying that Moshe Rabbeinu, meaning Nasi Adar, who's Goel, Rishnu Goel Achrein, he will lift up all the Jews through the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. So point number one of this last paragraph of this Maimer is a fancy way of saying that the Rebbe is Moshiach. No? That's what it says. That all the Jewish people, without any exception, will be lifted up by Nasi Ador, who's Goel Achrein, through the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. Okay? And it'll be fulfilled, the prediction or the promise. So point number two, the Rebbe mentions, like I said earlier, the Rebbe in the Maimer talks about the idea of Techiyas HaMesim. Because that now to take it from Yad Mamish, and all this will happen immediately. Because Nasi Dereinu already testified that we've already finished all of the Inyanim. Excuse me, it's very hard to focus. And we only need to polish the last buttons. The tactikas hakafterim hachreinim, to polish the last buttons. And now the Rebbe says very interesting. We have already polished the last button. We've already polished the last button. We'll talk about that in a second. So the Rebbe says we've already polished the last button. This is in a Maimer. Okay, and I'll just point out in the same sicha of Chof-Beis Shevat, Chof-Beis Shevat, that we were talking about before, where the Rebbe brings the whole thing of three tekufas. The Rebbe says clearly that polishing the buttons is the Friedrich Rebbe's lashon for.
We could continue polishing.
One second. So. Okay, we'll try to. If we have time, I'll try to talk about that at the end. But first, let's finish what we're doing. So the Rebbe says clearly in the sicha and in base that polishing the buttons is the Friedrich Rebbe's language for Avodas HaBerurim. Okay, Avodas HaBerurim is elevating the divine spark. So polishing the buttons means Avodas HaBerurim. The Rebbe says in Tafshin Memches we've already polished the last button. Okay, and in addition to this, that we polished the last button, there's already been a lot of prayers and requests and crying out on Masai. Like we say every day, we daven to Hashem that our eyes should see. Excuse me, I'm sorry, it's very hard to give a shir when so many people are talking. So the Rebbe is pointing out how often we're pasha davening for Moshiach after we've already finished Avodas HaBerurim with the polishing of the buttons. And we're saying this in Shemona Esrei when we're standing like a servant before the master. Right? We're standing with a bittul before the king, like we're a servant of the king, and a servant of the king is a king. So of course that means our tefillas have power. And that itself is an ending brachas where we're acknowledging we're doing an aveda of Haidah, which the Rebbe talks in all the places about the mile of Haidah. But Mele Bavada Yikurim came Bapel, V'Sechel Zene, Nina B'Shuv Chalatzim B'Rachamim, V'Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, Mimeno Oira Yetza L'Kol HaElam Kulei, Yikurim Le'ed V'Gar Zev Imekaves, B'Meir V'Min Mamash, V'Lei Ikvan Afilu Ke'eref Ein. Okay, that's the end of the mimer. So, I see over here 4 themes. 4 key points. You could point to more, but to me there's 4 that stood out. One is the Rebbe saying that the Messias Reish of the whole Jewish people happens through Nasi Ador and the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, which is in Mem Ches a way of the Rebbe saying clearly that the Rebbe is the Goyal Acharon going to lift up the whole Jewish people. To say that in Mem Ches so clearly is a powerful thing. To say it so clearly before is a powerful thing. Okay, point number 2 is the Rebbe talks about Techiyas HaMesim. Point number 3 is we've already polished the last button. We're no longer polishing buttons because we already polished the last button, which in the sicha, like I said, is the end of Avodas HaBerurim. And number 4 is Ad Masai, we're davening for Gula.
So from all of that, what you say, meaning that we're living now, what?
We still gotta wait.
So,
I'm saying, I mean, from all of this,
so
from all of these points, so it's meaning what? Or we're living in Moshiach time, or the...
what I'm saying is like this. These ideas, these 4 ideas of the Rebbe as Moshiach, Techiyas HaMesim, finishing Avodas HaBerurim, and asking for Moshiach, the importance of asking for Moshiach, these are most commonly associated with sichas of Tafshin and Alf and Tafshin and Beis. We all know that they're not exclusive to Alf and Beis, but those are the types of things, when you hear those concepts, a person thinks Tafshin and Alf, Tafshin and Beis. Right? And what I would like to suggest to you is that these ideas, I don't know everything there is to know about the third Kufa that started on Chof-Beis Shevat. I still have several volumes of Teres Menachem left to go. But what I would like to suggest is that these ideas, which we normally think of as being ideas from the Nalef and the Beis, they're not ideas from the Nalef and the Beis. They're ideas of the new Tekufa, that the Rebbe himself delineated and said that there's a third Tekufa that starts on Chof-Beis Shevat. Of course, but it begins before. And I never saw anywhere that the Rebbe himself says Vayikra Tafshin and Aleph is the start of a new Tekufa. It could be. The truth is, in the sicha, the Rebbe says that the Nesias is split up into Kama Tekufas and B'cholalos. It's these 3. So of course, now we all know that in Alf and Beis, the Rebbe took things to another level. Everybody understands that. But the point is that it didn't start then. It's not something that the Rebbe did for a year and it was yesh me'ayin and there was no basis for it before. What the Rebbe is saying is Dor HaShevii, which the Rebbe told us from day 1 means that we bring Moshiach, has to Kufas. We made progress from Tafshin Yud Aleph or even Tafshin Yud to Tafshin Mem Ches, and then began a new Tekufa. And you see right away at the beginning, the first mimer the Rebbe said in that Tekufa, all the Bechlolos, all of the Inyanim of Menaf and Beis.
Reinvigorate.
So I think that for us, we have to understand that this is the Tekufa that we're in. These should not be to us ideas that are something that the Rebbe spoke about in that last year where the Rebbe was really, it's something for years the Rebbe was emphasizing. We're in a new time period, and these ideas are relevant in this time period. And you have to know about these ideas. And you have to be involved in these ideas. And that is the avodah of our time, of the Tekufa that began on Chof-Beis Shevat. Now you asked the question, I have a couple minutes left to try to address this very quickly. You asked the question, how long about what's with keep on polishing the buttons? So in the sicha from the Beis, the Rebbe goes on and says not only are they 3 tekufas, the Rebbe explains that each tekufa represents a different stage in the avodah of finishing to create a dir b'tachtayim. The Rebbe explains it in terms of 10 and 11, right? So the Rebbe explains the whole dir b'tachtayim that it's about fusing 10, which represents the structure of the world, with 11, which is Atzmus U'Mahus, the Eibishter, who is completely higher than the structure of the world. And the Rebbe splits it into three parts. The Rebbe says very interesting. Finishing the Avodah of Dir B'Tachteinim happens in three tekufas. Why? Because it has to be mitzad the Tachteinim, and everything in Tachteinim is a process. There's nothing in this world, in Olam HaTachtein, which is not a process. So the Rebbe says this too, finishing the Avodah, not just the Avodah as a whole, but the end of the Avodah, the Gemara of the Avodah, is also something that happens in a process. And the three stages, and maybe we'll talk about it more another time because we're running out of time, but the three stages b'chlos that the Rebbe says, these are the three stages, are that for the 10 and the 11 to come together b'shleimus, which is the idea of Yesha Nivrahu Yesha Amiti, okay, which is Dir B'Tachteinim. So first the 10 needs to be refined and prepared for the 11 in such a way that when the 11 comes, it won't be nisbatel. It'll be ready to be able to handle the Gili of the 11.
So the time will be living now.
One second. So then the 11 is introduced. The 11 is introduced and comes into the 10, but in a way that it sort of overrides the 10, and it's not this perfect
10% of the other 10. That's what I'm saying. It's a unique type of addition. It's not a given number.
Right. 11 is called 11 because it's different. It's separate from the 10. It's a higher thing than the 10. So the 11 comes in and overrides the 10, so to speak. This is not either the Kavanah. The Rebbe compares it to Matan Torah. Matan Torah, they got the Gilui, but they all flew out of their bodies. The world couldn't handle it. It wasn't permanent. They sinned afterward. Right. All the different problems, but the chesroinus of Matan Torah that happened because Matan Torah was milamayla, that it was superimposed, it was not integrated well into the Tachteinim, so to speak. Okay, and then stage 3, which is what the Rebbe says is expressed by Chof-Beis Shevat, is when the 11, the way it is, and the 10, the way it is, come together, combine b'shleimus. Now, what does that mean? It sounds like I'm saying a lot of words, 11 and 10 and Asmus and world. What does all this mean? So the Rebbe introduces the Lashon, Yesha Nivrahu Davar Echadim Yesha Amiti. Now, I don't have time to explain fully what it means. I don't claim to fully understand what it means myself. But the point is that this is a sugya and Chassidus. Chassidus has a discussion about a concept, a type of bittul called Yesha Nivrahu Yesha Amiti. It calls it the bittul of Ein Oid, the bittul of Ein Oid Movadai, and the Rebbe tells sources in the footnotes. Yoreh Zohar from the Mitzvah Rebbe, a mimer from Tafir Samach Aleph, the famous Hamshach of Samach Aleph, the Rebbe Rashab talks about Yesha Nivra Yesha Amiti. The Rebbe talks about a certain sicha in the sichas where the Rebbe brings it up, and over there there's other sichas. In other words, the Rebbe in the footnotes, in the Pnim of the Sicha, the Rebbe says this merging of the 10 and 11, this is the idea of Yesha Nivrahu Yesha Amiti. This is an idea in Chassidus. In the footnotes, the Rebbe tells you everywhere you need to look to learn about this idea of Yesha Nivrahu Yesha Amiti. So this idea, if you ask me, becomes sort of the central idea in Chassidus of our time. Because this is the ultimate result. This is the ultimate kavanah, and this is what the Rebbe is saying is connected to our tekufa. So a couple of years ago when I was in Yeshiva and I was making everybody crazy about the Rebbe saying that Avodas Abarurim is over, and people were saying, what's the point, who cares, what difference to make Avodas Abarurim is over. One of the tainas that I got was, so we shouldn't learn those Maimarim anymore? We shouldn't learn those Maimarim that talk about the process of Birurim and all the things? And I said, no, of course you should learn the process of Avodas Abarurim. You have to understand the process of Avodas Abarurim. But first of all, you need to understand it as a process that was completed. You're learning about a process that was completed, not a process that is ongoing. And second of all, just as much as you're worried about missing out on understanding what is Avodas Abarurim, you should be just as worried about missing out on what is this concept of Yesha Nivrahu Yesha Amiti. Because Yesha Nivrahu Yesha Amiti is the result. Avodas Abarurim is the process. And the Rebbe is saying in our Tekufa, the process is over and we're stepping into the era of the result. And therefore, it's important for us to learn and understand what is this Yesha Nivrahu Yesha Amiti, because that is what a Dir B'Tachteinim really is. That is what the Kavanah really is, and that is really what we're asking for when we say we want Moshiach now.
So we finished Palestine.
That's what it said in the Maimon from the
Very good.